Hands-on, creating custom graphics. In this video, we'll be creating some fairly simple custom graphics to get things rolling. We won't be doing anything too detailed or intricate because that's not the object of this course. Even if I included hours upon hours of me creating this and that, you'd see me perform virtually the same handful of actions over and over again. Like I previously said in the other video, it's up to you to analyze graphics you see on great-looking websites, break them down, and figure out the thought process behind them. Then implement those findings into your own library of knowledge and practice hard. With that out of the way, I have only one thing left to mention. Like with all exercises, you should try to perform the task without seeing me do it. So this is your chance to pause and create these 3 icons in Photoshop however you see fit. Take as much time as you need, and it's up to you if you want to create a perfect replica or just something similar. If you don't have the time to do it, simply skip over to the next video. After you've done the exercise, come back to this point and see my take on it. So, this is your last chance. Okay, so we have to create these 3 icons in Photoshop. I'll only do the first one in order to keep the video fairly short. I won't try to perfectly replicate it because that would be more time-consuming. The end result will be very similar though, so let's get started. First, the circle. I'll add one of the icons into my 1000 by 800 pixel canvas to have a sense of things. This flat green is pretty nice, and as we can see, the other colours are in the same range, so they all go together quite nicely. We should also notice this document goes outside the icon area, which adds a nice detail to it. So let's get the ellipse tool and create a perfect circle. We can either drag while holding Shift, or we can simply click once and enter our dimensions. I usually go with the first option, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to input my measurements manually, 185 by 185. To create a flat colour, I have several options, but I'm going to do this. Double-click on this thumbnail to bring up the colour picker, then sample this green. Next, move this slider up and down without modifying our initial position on the left side. I'll stick with a colour code I already know, 5B82C3. And that was obtained through this very same procedure. For the document part, we'll use the rectangle and my measurements will be 80 by 95 pixels. Again, in general, I'd use the drag approach, but I want this end result to be exactly like the one attached to your course. I'll position it 10 pixels above our ellipse layer. For the bottom part, which has this pattern, I'm going to use the pen tool to add 7 points along the bottom edge of the rectangle. To help me do that, I'll add vertical guides 10 pixels apart, starting from the edge of the shape. I'm going to zoom in really close and do that one by one. We could manually input the guides, but I prefer to drag them from the side and use the measurement on the screen to perfectly position it. This is one way of doing it. You can, of course, use any technique you want. After all 7 guides are well positioned, we'll use the pen tool. Make sure you see the initial 4 anchor points before you get started. Use the direct selection tool to bring them up. Then with the pen tool, make sure you have this plus symbol on your cursor and click on the intersection between our document layer and our guide. After you've clicked, hold down Alt while still being on the pen tool to use the convert point tool. Click once and you're good. Move on to the next one and repeat the process. Click once with the plus symbol, hold down Alt and click again. Do this for each one of the 7 intersections. After that's done, get the direct selection tool, select one point, and with the use of Shift and the up arrow key, move it 10 pixels upwards. Then repeat the process for every point. I know this may be a little bit difficult for some of you, but take your time. Rewatch the video, pause it several times as you work along, and you'll get the technique. After you're done, we're out of the woods. That was the most difficult part, even though it was more tedious than anything. For the document lines, get the rectangle tool and draw one that's 60 pixels wide and 4 pixels tall. Make sure it's white and have it bang in the center of your document. The distance from the top should be 10 pixels. Then duplicate it with Alt and Shift and position it 8 pixels underneath. Repeat the process until you have 4 lines. For the stamp, things are super easy. Use the rectangle tool to create a circle which should be 10 pixels by 10 pixels and white. Then duplicate it with Ctrl J and enlarge it to 16 by 16 pixels. Drop it underneath our first circle in the Layers panel. Then lower its fill to 0% and add a stroke. Just change the colour to white. Reposition these 2 layers if needed. It's time to clean up our Layers panel because things are getting messy. First layer should be called Inner Stamp, and the one with the stroke should be Outer Stamp. Rename these 4 shapes to Line. You can use copy-paste if you want, then group them into a folder. Rename that Lines. The dark blue layer should be called Document, and the main circle should be called BG. OK, let's move on. The jacket and shirt part are a series of rectangles, so let's get started. Get the rectangle tool and draw one that's 38 pixels tall. The width doesn't really matter because the next step is to create a clipping mask. So press Ctrl, Alt, G. This is how the Layers panel should look. Again, this is one way of doing it, there are of course other ways too. To change the colour, we're going to sample the document and move the slider down, this time from the left part. The colour code I went for is 273956. A darker shade of blue, nothing fancy. Centre the new layer horizontally inside the BG layer. Then take it down 20 pixels with the help of the Shift key. Create a new rectangle, this time 5 by 34 pixels. This should be white and it should be centred vertically with our previous layer. For the button, use the ellipse to create a 3 by 3 pixel circle. Change its colour to that dark blue we previously used, 273956. Position it in the middle of our white rectangle, horizontally, and leave 2 empty pixels from the bottom. OK, renaming time. This last layer is called Button. The white rectangle is Shirt, and the blue one is Sleeve. Duplicate this last one and make the clipping mask. Use Ctrl T to resize it so its height is only 7 pixels. Then use the colour picker and choose a lower value. I went with 202F47. Rename this to Sleeve Shadow. If at any point you're not happy with the progress, feel free to make adjustments. For example, you may want to extend the entire thing more towards the centre of the BG layer. To do that, select the button, shirt, sleeve and sleeve shadow layers and move them a few pixels to the right. Adjust it as you see fit. Next we'll jump to the credit card and leave the hand for last. The credit card can be done with the help of the rounded rectangle tool. The size should be 75 by 50 pixels and the corner radius should be 5 pixels. Regarding the colour, we'll use the same one as for the document, so sample that and you're good to go. Add a rectangle that's 75 by 8 pixels. Make it white. Then place it 10 pixels from the top edge. Next, add another rectangle, 16 by 3 pixels, white again. Position them on the right side of the card. With these little details, you can make your own judgment call. It's fine to play around a few pixels here and there. Duplicate the layer until you have 3 lines and make sure you have the same height between them. Then use the marquee tool to check the spacing on the top, right and bottom so they all match. Lastly, add another rectangle, this time 16 by 10 pixels. Again, make sure the positioning is spot on. 1 pixel off might slide, but starting from 2 pixels on, things are noticeably wrong. Ideally, you should have the same spacing throughout. Tedious, yes, but it's well worth it. Now for the hand, the part that some of you may dislike. We'll use the pen tool here, but make sure this setting is on shape, not on path. Now it's time to get clicking. I really don't have a step-by-step guide here, you simply have to click and see what happens. Try it a few times and you'll get better each time. It can be frustrating, but you have to be patient. If you're having a particularly hard time, you can trace over the inspiration image. I won't be doing that since I like the struggle, but in the case of some very difficult shapes, I might use a Google image to trace over. Obviously, it's far better you practice without any guides, but we all have to start off somewhere. After you've made your shape, change its colour, this time use a light cream yellow colour. This isn't particularly related to any other colour we've previously used, but it should be a skin tone. I'll go with EE-EA-D5. If you don't like how it came out, you have to use the pen and the direct selection tool. Go in and out, reposition anchor points, create new ones, delete others, do whatever you need to do in order to get it right. I know I haven't covered the pen tool in this course, but you will need it on rare occasions, sometimes in custom graphics. This though is more towards illustration work than web design, so I decided to leave the theory part out of it. You've already seen most of the uses anyway, so hopefully we can move ahead. One thing to remember, press Enter while on the direct selection tool to make all the anchor points disappear. Use Ctrl-Shift-H to make them appear. Let's clean up our layers panel again. For the hand layer, we'll name it Hand. For the thick white line, we'll use Big Line. And for the three little ones, we'll group them as they are and call them Little Lines. The white rectangle should be Square, and the card background should be Card BG. Now group all the card layers into one folder and rename it to Card. Great. Lastly, I want to touch upon a small detail you might have noticed. In our example, the hand has its thumb on top of the card, while the rest of it is underneath it. This makes for a nice effect, even though it's not very noticeable. Let's do the same thing to our icon. Select the hand layer in the Layers panel. Then hold Ctrl and click on the thumbnail of the Card BG layer to make a selection. Next, hold down the Alt key and press on this mask icon. Lastly, get a brush, any of the basic ones will do. I'm using this second one, but you can use anything you like as long as its hardness is set at 100%. Now with white as the foreground colour and the mask active, start painting over where the thumb would be. This reveals it, and now we get that nice effect we were looking for. Make sure you're painting inside the mask and not on the layer. There's a clear difference between having the mask selected and having the layer selected. And that's our custom graphic. I know it wasn't the easiest thing in the world for some of you. Take it slow, rewatch the video, practice, and you'll get the hang of it. Remember, this type of work requires a very different skill set to what most web designers have. So be patient, work hard, and results will follow. It's up to you to balance your work schedule with this new time-consuming task. I strongly recommend you create the other two icons. The same principles apply. Do your best, take your time, and if you find yourself stuck, Google is your friend. If you can't find anything helpful, just contact me and I'll do my best to help. Good luck.